Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 5, I think, of the Creature Crossing podcast. Today, we are joined by Andreas. How are you today, sir?
Pretty well, thank you.
Fantastic. And Brennick, my co host, is also here with us, who was absent last episode, unfortunately. Brennick, how are you today?
Doing excellent, thank you. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Um, so, I didn't film like a little thing. Where were you last time, Brennick, just in case people are wondering where you went?
I was sleeping like a baby
Yep.
because unfortunately I work in transit, so I
Yep. Fantastic.
You had to
had
take
to
your
knock
rest.
out.
Yeah. Yeah. Brennick had texted me. He was like, I have to get up at 2 in the morning. I was like, dude,
No
we record
podcast
way too late
today.
for that. The last thing I need is for you to blow up a family in a public bus. So he set that one up. So we're here with Andreas today, and it's a little different than our usual podcast as a herpetological podcast. Today we're talking about fish. Specifically, we're talking about the genus Esox, which is Pike and Friends. Um, Andreas, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you study? Not
Sure,
even just maybe Esox, but in general, and then maybe you can go down
sure.
to
My
focusing a bit.
background as I'm trained as an ichthyologist or fish systematist. I'm interested in fish diversity in general. Early in my career, I did a, a bit of work with the family that includes the pikes and their allies. And currently I'm on the faculty at the University of Alaska in Fairbanks, where we meaning me and my collaborators study Alaskan fish diversity. We primarily rely on genetics to learn things about differences between populations, differences between species, building evolutionary trees of relationships between different species and groups of fish. So yeah, and here at UAF at the University of Alaska, I'm the curator of the fish collection at the Museum of the North.
Oh wow, that's cool. I was reading a bunch of your papers, doing trying to do a little bit of professional research. It never goes well. I usually just end up looking at pictures. But I the reason I ended up contacting you originally, which by the way, funnily enough, even though this is a herpetological themed podcast, you were the first person I ever emailed to come on the show.
Oh, that's
So
fine. Oh, that's
I
a
had to I had to make it wait a few episodes. That way we got a few reptile ones out. But yeah, you were the first one. A pike idea was something that Brennick and I talked about really early on, mostly because I'm a
cool.
big pike nerd.
Uh-huh.
Um, I'm like you we were saying a little bit before we went on air there that you're not a fisherman at all, correct?
No, no. I
No.
like
Okay.
studying fish, mostly using little fin clips to look at their genetics
Yeah.
and specimens, preserved specimens. But usually, if I'm out there catching fish, it's with a seine to pull a whole bunch of individuals out of a river instead of
Yeah.
angling from them for them.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show is because as an angler myself, I think I angle for a really different reason than most people. Whereas it's because I'm really interested in the species and that I catch, and I kind of chase after unique individuals, especially pike, but I'll fish for some other stuff too.
Hmm.
Um, and I was super interested in having you on because if you're using a rod and reel and a hook to bring in a pike, you're not getting a lot of information from them aside from what they look like,
How
and
well they
like you're not
fight.
getting yeah, exactly. You're not getting really many behaviors because the animal is fighting you, and it's not going to exhibit any natural behaviors and whatnot. But the other thing I'm really interested in is the natural history. I want to know
Hmm.
where pike came from, and
Okay.
so I'm in northern Ontario. We have huge pike up here,
Hmm.
monsters. Um, the biggest I ever saw, my friend caught last year, and was like, I don't know, it was big. It was over 36 for sure.
Okay.
And Brennick, do you catch many pike down there? I know you fish a little bit.
Just
I
yesterday,
hate to
I
admit it.
Go ahead,
just yesterday,
Brennick.
I shared a picture of a pike that he caught in a region called the Yukon Flats here in Alaska, and we get really large pike. So this fish that my student or a student that in the program caught was about 42 inches. So we get
That's
monster
cool.
pike in Alaska.
Yeah, that's very cool. Where Brennick's from, which is where I'm from originally, they don't get very big anymore. There's a few monsters in Toronto,
Hmm.
but they're very fish out. Do you fish a lot, Brennick? Before we move off of fishing for hopefully the rest of the episode.
I do, but I specifically fish for walleye, and
Okay.
we're
Mm,
just trolling.
yeah,
Hmm.
Uh, I've never caught a pike.
yeah,
I've tried
they're hard.
to
They're not easy to
many
catch down
times.
there. Yeah, they're super easy up here. They're actually like people hate them up here because everybody's going
They
for
get in
walleye.
the.
Yeah, they get in the way of the walleye,
Mhm.
and I'm like the only guy up here who's like got. I know you don't need to use big lures. I got these huge lures because I like them to catch big pike. But
Mhm.
anyway, besides the point. So before we get into kind of their evolution and whatnot, if I'm not mistaken, are pike are invasive in Alaska. Is that correct?
Not everywhere. So
Okay,
they
that's
are
interesting. I
invasive
didn't
in
know that.
parts of Alaska and native to most of Alaska.
Oh,
If
cool.
you
Wow.
visualize a map of Alaska, we have the Alaska Range that kind of cordons off the the area where Anchorage is located. So it forms a wall so that there are rivers draining south into the northern Pacific Ocean. And then north of the Alaska Range, there's the Yukon and the Kuskokwim rivers that drain into the Bering Sea. North of the Alaska Range, pike are native. South of the Alaska Range, our best understanding is that they're introduced, that all the populations south of the Alaska Range were are descendants of introduced fish that people moved from somewhere, maybe from the interior of Alaska, so north of the Alaska Range, or maybe from somewhere else. But by all accounts, that part of the distribution of pike in Alaska is non-native.
Wow. And do you study both those populations at all?
Yeah, we've done research on both. I'm mostly interested in the native range, but we did a genetic study to try to figure out
Hmm.
exactly how all these introduced populations were, and maybe to try to pin down where they came from. What we learned is that there's a good chance that there's multiple introductions that people may have moved them more than once to different places. A little bit of a kind of related story there. In there's a large community of people, researchers, agencies interested in understanding the invasion of pike south of the Alaska Range because they have an impact on salmonids primarily, which is a big concern here in Alaska. So this community is always, has eyes on what is going on with pike in that part of the state. And not too long ago, and I forget the exact years, but on the Kenai Peninsula, which is the famous area where big king salmon fisheries take place, recreational fisheries take place, there was a documented case of not a pike but a muskie, and
Whoa.
there are no muskie native populations anywhere close to Alaska. So it was definitely the case that somebody, we don't know who, was very interested in having muskies in Alaska and flew juveniles, eggs, something, all the way from the Midwest to the Kenai Peninsula. So folks, do it with some frequency. Going back to the research that we conducted, we did find there's there's very little genetic variation, but indication that there's multiple types of introduced pike there.
Oh, very cool. Now, I where Brennick is, there's muskie. Where I am, there's no muskie up here.
Hmm.
So our pike get muskie sized, right? But
Uh-huh.
but wow, that's pretty interesting. I want to ask you a little bit more about muskie later on,
Okay.
just being within, just fit in with it. We'll probably focus mostly on northern pike, um, but I'm a like pike are my favorite, but I'm a bit of a muskie nerd as well, just because I mean I think Brennick said something a couple, like Brennick's a size queen, I'm a size queen too. Like I
Mhm.
like the big ones, right? And these things are like, I don't know, like our last episode was about mosasaurs,
Oh,
and
cool.
this pike have always reminded me of mosasaurs. Like in no way other than the way they look,
Just
and
the big
yeah,
snout.
like they're just a cool shape. And
Mhm.
you look at a muskie, and that's like, and you hear the old stories of muskie, and like they're so ingrained in local even folklore that I don't know, they're almost like a legendary animal in my mind
Mhm.
because I've never seen one. I've never muskie fished personally, but like I don't know. I've this, and this is like maybe not to like you, but to other people listening, especially if any anglers listen. Um, I've always liked the idea of like, hey, what if I get like into recreational scuba diving and just go like check out Pike? You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And like that'd be so cool to do. And I think there's a couple like channels and whatnot that will post where they just kind of set up, I don't know, a GoPro underwater, and
Mhm.
they have
Let's see
probably
what's going
paid
on
the
there.
area and whatever.
Yeah.
And some of the behaviors that these fish like will show, and not even just pikes, but I mean we're talking about pikes, so they have some really neat behaviors, and I think they're not to. I think they're diverse with their behavior personally, and that's coming from a non-professional experience. But could you give us any insight into maybe your research hasn't focused on this necessarily, but of your even beliefs on if these fish are not only as diverse as they are in my mind,
Mhm.
behavioral wise, but like how smart are these things?
That's a good question. So yeah, I have not done any personal research on
Hmm.
behavior or movement in pike, but there are quite a few studies trying to figure out if they're sedentary, if they have migration patterns, and like you already imagined by your own observations, there's a lot of variability. There
Yeah,
are there are individuals that just sit in one spot and hold position, waiting for prey to come around and move very little. And then there are movers that are switching from place to place. And it may be that it's a matter of finding the right spot, and when they're well situated, then there's really no good reason to go look for scout for a new location. And then there are others that maybe they get pushed out of the right spots, right? If pike will eat pike or be aggressive to other pike, so there may be some territoriality component that forces the smaller individuals to move more, looking for places where they can be without getting pushed around by the big pike that are on the best spots. So there's a couple of papers that come to mind where folks have put trackers on pike, and try to figure out if there's a pattern to their movement. And what I remember from reading those papers is there's no clear pattern. Not every pike behaves the same way. There are some that are sedentary and some that move around quite a bit. So yeah, there's
that's
diversity in
interesting.
pike behaviors. And I don't
Yeah,
know what that says about their smarts, but it probably says more about the fact that they're out there competing with other pike for locations that are good sitting spots. From first principles, I would say they're not really built to be constant swimmers. They're not really, unlike salmon or some other fish that are built to be constantly in motion. Pike are sit and wait predators, they're ambush predators. So my intuition would be that if a pike had its choice, it would find a good spot and stick to it, and not move unless spawning time comes around. And the ones that move a lot may be doing it because they either didn't find a good spot or they're being excluded from the good spots from other pike in the population.
yeah, wow. Yeah, that's a cool thing to think about. In herpetoculture, like reptile intelligence is so understudied. Maybe I'm wrong, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if like in in fishes that was even more so the case. A, because there's so many goddamn fish, but like also because people, I mean, we thought reptiles were stupid cold animals up until many people like a decade ago. Like some people
Hmm.
still think that. Lots of people, the public still thinks that, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if fishes were the exact same way, just because of how I don't know humans are when it comes to
Hmm.
animals that are that different from us that we don't really understand how their brains are working and whatnot.
Hmm.
Um, I have a pike painting here. Can you see it?
No, it's too
Check
oh, there
that
we
bad
go.
boy up.
Nice.
My friend painted that for me,
That's that's
and
cool. I
I
like
had to
it.
bring it up at some point.
Uh-huh. Nice.
Right here. There we go. Brannick, do you have any questions for Andreas yet?
Well, I was just going to comment on like fish intelligence. I can't speak for Pike, but I should preface this by saying I don't want to anthropomorphize,
Hmm.
but I had a dog-faced puffer fish who
Oh,
used to
cool.
get super excited when you walked in the room, and he'd come up to the surface and spit water at me. So
He knew you were
again, I
there.
think just like you said, it's so understudied, and I can almost guarantee they're more intelligent than we give them credit for.
Yeah, probably. I was gonna your anecdote there reminded me of one I had where pike obviously don't like each other, and that's like very clear. And if you look
Hmm.
at pike in general, but I a couple of years ago I was fishing at this dam, and the dam at the very bottom. I don't know if all dams are like this. I'm not a damologist, but had a turbine that would churn up I don't know fish, I guess, and it would create all this food and
No.
a lot of
So they were
pike and
just
smallmouth
sitting there.
bass. Oh yeah, so there was a lot of big animals there,
Hmm.
and I had caught. I had seen in the water. They were both. There was two big ones. They were both over 30, um, and they were swimming around together beside each other. And I was like, oh my god! So I caught one, brought it in. The other one couldn't care less that I had caught its little buddy. It didn't fit in my net, so it almost got out. I bought a bigger net that day, but I got it in, and its tail was. I'll find the picture of it because it was pretty cool. When I noticed it, it took me a minute. Its tail was missing completely.
Oh,
It didn't have
wow.
a tail, and it was like fresh.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know if
How
this
it
other pike it was
happened.
with
Uh-huh.
like had like right just then taken a nibble, and then the pike was like, "Oh, I don't care. I'm still gonna eat." It was fast enough to chase my like I use pretty quick lures,
Right.
um, but that was pretty cool to see. I assume it was a pike, just you
Probably,
know,
yeah. I mean,
my
they're
best
they're
guess.
voracious. That's
Yeah,
that's one thing everybody knows about pike. They will eat anything that is and that they can fit in their mouth, regardless of
yeah, or
species.
stuff
Or
they can't fit in their mouth, and
sometimes
you know,
they
yeah,
get too greedy and they fail to swallow whatever they try to eat, and then that's the end of the line. But yeah, they're voracious. They are top
I've seen
predators,
that.
and they will eat
Yeah.
anything. Here in
Speaking of,
Alaska, they eat all the um, little mammals that either fall in the water or are swimming through water. That's fair prey. Birds, anything.
yeah, I saw one go after a bird, I 2 years ago. Um, fishing at a lake, and it was right before the sun went down, and there was a just a little bush about 20 feet to my left, and it dipped right into the water. Little Tweety bird goes right on it. So as soon as it starts to drink, just I heard the slap and saw the tail, and it missed the bird. But I was like, I was over the moon. Like that's because in my mind, I'm like, that's how crocodiles hunt, right? Like that's very cool. That was very cool to see
Hmm.
like shoreline. And there's other fish that will shoreline hunt, but like to see it in person from a species that is so common where I am was really special to see. It would have been cooler if it got the bird, but you know, I definitely give them props for trying because that was super awesome.
Yeah.
Um, can you tell us a little bit about the diversity of what they eat? I know the basic answer is everything, but if you could maybe go into a little bit of detail on that.
Yeah, well, the answer is still everything.
Yep.
They start when they're very little. They start eating aquatic inverts and little things because at that size, obviously, they're not big enough to eat fish. But as soon as they are big enough, they'll start eating other pike right away. They're voracious cannibals, and if it's a location, a habitat that is loaded with pike that are they're all being born at the same stage, and as soon as they get big enough, they'll start feeding on other pike, and then any other fish species that is available to consume as juveniles. And once they get big enough to start eating small mammals, small birds, frogs, they will eat that too. So, yeah, to my understanding, they're not picky. They're carnivores, and obviously they prefer fish in the sense that fish is the most available prey item that they tend to have access to. But they will not pass up on the opportunity to eat anything else that is in the water and that's small enough to consume.
Yeah,
So
there's
yeah.
been cases too that you always see them in the news. Well, not always. It's happened, I think, twice in that I know of in my lifetime where I have either read a newspaper or saw an article or something on the news where a pike or muskie has, whether it was just an over eccentric individual or a case of mistaken identity, have gone after people. there was
Oh,
a girl there was
I
a
think
girl in Ontario who got her calf bitten really bad, like by a muskie, and it was like, what the
there was
hell?
a story here in Alaska not too long ago. I want to say like 4 or 5 years ago of pike in a quarry going after somebody's little dog. They were walking a
Oh, I think
dog,
I heard about
and,
that.
and the dog was waiting in the shallows, and a pike give it a good shot.
Yeah.
One thing I did think about when thinking about diets, there's this idea that if there is a choice of fish to eat, they would be more likely to feed on soft ray fin fish. So things like salmon that have soft bones in their fins tend to be preferred over something like catfish or something that is spiny for obvious reasons. You can get in a lot less trouble trying to swallow a salmon the wrong way than trying to swallow a catfish the wrong way. So there may be some preference and some choice where they go harder after soft finned fishes versus spiny fishes. But here in Alaska, there aren't very many spiny fish, so they'll eat anything. Here in Alaska, the bulk of the freshwater fish fauna is made up of salmonids, and then there's a few other things. There's some minnows. We have no catfish. So here in Alaska, they eat everything that's there, with maybe some preference towards salmonids because they're the right shape and very nice and energy rich.
It's kind of a shame you guys don't have catfish. That's my second favorite fish.
Yeah,
is is catfishes. I think they're very awesome.
No, quick question for you. Functionally, how do they eat? Do they eat their prey whole, or
yeah,
do they rip
oh
with
yeah.
their?
They'll just chase it down. Usually, kind of an ambush strike. They're usually kind of semi-hidden in submerged vegetation, and then they'll take a quick strike and try to get the prey into their mouths and then swallow the whole thing, which is true of most fish. Most fish do not chew their food. Most fish just swallow whole. They do have in their mouth, as you probably know, very sharp teeth, and the teeth of pike are pretty interesting. And in fact, they're a diagnostic feature that has allowed paleontologists to figure out whether a fossil belongs in the pike group or not. Their teeth are, they swivel, they're on a hinge base that allows those teeth to be pushed down facing towards the back of the mouth, towards the esophagus. But if you try to push them the other way towards the outside of the mouth, they lock in place. So a prey item can start sliding down the mouth of a pike, and then if it tries to swim away, those teeth will anchor in and then get locked into place. So there's only one way to get out of the mouth of a pike, and that is through the esophagus. Otherwise, you're stuck there. So
Oh, that's cool.
yeah, so
I didn't
not
know
for
about that.
chewing, but for holding on to the prey as it struggles and makes a brave attempt at getting out of that mouth. Usually
Yeah,
a
I didn't.
failed
That's really cool.
attempt.
Yeah, I didn't know they had swivel teeth. That's really cool. Which is something maybe I should have known. I found an awesome pike skull on an island about two. I think it was also about 2 years ago. We were camping on this island overnight, and just on the shore there, in between some of the rocks, I found a pike skull, and I've got it upstairs now. I probably should have brought it down, but it was pretty cool find. I never finagled with the teeth at all, though. Maybe I should wiggle them a
Does
little
it
bit.
does it still have teeth on it?
Oh yeah, lots.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
take a look. And usually in fossils, what you find, you don't find the teeth still on the tooth-bearing bones. You just find the tooth-bearing bone, like the ones that make up the roof of the mouth or the lower jaw. And if you look at the bases where the teeth would be attached to those bones, instead of being a complete circle, it's a C-shaped base with the C pointing towards the outside of the mouth. And the part that's missing on that circle, the negative of the C, faces towards the back of the mouth. That's the place where that tooth is unattached. So the
Cool.
tooth can fall down in that direction, but then when it's moving in the other direction, it hits that C base and it stops from moving or angling out towards the outside of the mouth. So
Oh, that's
if you
cool.
ever come across like the jawbone of a fish, even if it doesn't have teeth, by looking at those bases, you can tell whether it came from a pike or not.
Well, now I have to after this. I'll go upstairs and I'll nerd out about the because it has. I have the both jaws, and the bottom one is way better. It's just better. It's in better quality.
Yeah,
The
take a
top,
look.
everything at the top is very thin, whereas the bottom is a nice thick bone, and it's. I think it's got about half its teeth in it still. So that's very cool. I'll check that out, and I'm glad you started to bring kind of the evolutionary history or fossil history of pike up too. Is that was something I really wanted to talk about in general. I'm very curious as to how pike and when pike made it to North America. So I'm very interested to ask you about that. Do you have any answers
Sure.
for me? Because the 20 minutes of research I did didn't
Yeah,
find a
so
whole lot.
so the fossil record of pikes. So going back to this characteristic anatomy of tooth-bearing bones, because they have this very diagnosable feature, folks that study fossil fish have had good luck assigning fossils, even fragmentary fossils, just little pieces of the dentary bone, the one in the lower jaw, or little pieces of the palatine bone, the one that makes up the roof of the mouth. Just by having a little piece, if you see those C-shaped bases, folks feel comfortable saying this belonged to a pike. And thanks to that, the fossil record of pike goes back to about between 75 to 80 million years. The earliest
Oh
pikes
wow.
are from about that time. And it started in North America and it has never left North America. So going back
Oh
to your
really?
question, pike didn't arrive in North America. Pike were always in North America. That's
Okay.
their most ancient ancestor was a freshwater fish, probably a freshwater fish in the northern land masses. So at about this time, about 80 million years ago, Pangea had already split, and you had southern land masses and then northern land masses. And it was on the northern land masses that the earliest bits of history of the pike lineage started diversifying and shooting off different species.
Okay. And is that the same for like of our understanding of the genus Esox specifically? Like always assumed that Esox would have, and again, this is just based on guesses. Like I didn't look too
Mhm.
much into it because I knew we were having you on. Would have started in either Europe or Asia, like a whole bunch of other species we have in North America today, and then crossed over at some point, and then diversified after that.
So that's an interesting question, and it doesn't have a solid answer. But around this period, let's say 70 to 80 million years, or maybe a little wider than that, you had northern land masses that were connected in different ways from what we see today. So, for example, there are many periods of time when Alaska and Asia would just be one long stretch of land connected. So, in other words, at that time, calling something Asian or North American the end makes doesn't make tons of sense because it's there's one chunk that connects everything from Western North America into Asia, then a big seaway, and then Eastern North America separated from that, then Europe on its own, and disconnected from Asia on the other side. So it's all a moving puzzle where you're trying to assign dates of origin based on fossils, but as you know, the fossil gives you a good sense of the earliest possible time something showed, or the latest possible time something showed up. So once we have those little bones with the characteristic bases to their teeth, we know that by that time, by 75 million years ago, pike were there. But we don't know how much farther back, because obviously we didn't get lucky. We didn't get so lucky that we came across the true first member of the group. We just have a good sense of the latest possible time that group showed up. But where to place the root or the very base of that line is a little less certain. And that's
Yeah.
where it becomes difficult to say, is it in the piece of the northern landmasses that now make up Western North America and Asia, or was it in the piece of the northern landmasses that now we call Europe? There's a lot of uncertainty there. And as a caveat, I'm not a paleontologist, so
Yeah, of course, of course.
so those guys have very sophisticated ways of thinking about this puzzle and try to put it together in a cohesive picture. I know enough to know the general dates and interpret what the fossils are telling us about origins, but the the good solid answer that would be very satisfying to be able to give you doesn't exist as far as I understand.
Gotcha. Okay, good to know. Um, yeah, that makes sense too. And I assume too that, well, so those, and I know you're saying that that you're not a paleontologist there, but from your understanding, are those early examples of species or genuses with those tooth swivels and whatnot? Do you know if they are believed to be like very pike shaped? Because I know the closest ancestors of like living ancestors of Esox today in the group or the whatever it is, not very good with fish taxonomy. A lot of them are look nothing like pike, where they're like these tiny little
They
fish like
look a
this
little
big.
bit like Pike.
Well, yeah, in the sense that they look like a fish, but you know, I sometimes I expect to look at like um, and I'm not talking about like pickerel and stuff like that, but I can't remember what they were called. I wish I did.
You think about
But
minnows?
yeah, yeah, those guys, mud minnows and stuff.
Uh-huh.
And you know, I kind of when I was researching into them a little bit, I almost expected to see like a little elongated face with like an
Uh-huh.
elongated body, and you know, like, but I kind of didn't see that.
So the next time you look up some pictures, pay attention to, instead of paying attention to the head, pay attention to the back half of the body. So
Okay.
the group that you're thinking about are, it's not really a group because pike are nested inside this larger group. But the types of fish you're thinking about include the standard mud minnows, and there's a couple of different species, some in Eastern North America and one in Europe. And then there's something called the Alaska. Well, it's not called the Alaska blackfish. There are blackfishes, including species that live in Alaska and in western or eastern Chukotka, or easternmost Asia. And then there's something called the Olympic mud minnow, which is found only in the state of Washington. That's the entire distribution is in the centers around the Olympic Peninsula in the state of Washington. And the deal there is those three types of mud minnows are all relatives of the pike, but the pike family, the Isocidae, that includes all of the members of the genus Esox, is nested in the evolutionary tree that is formed by the mud minnows plus the pike. Going back to your question, if you pull up some pictures of either an Olympic mud minnow or a blackfish or the eastern mud minnow and pay attention to the back half of the fish, you'll notice that the dorsal and the anal fins are placed back, far back in the body around the caudal peduncle, the support of the caudal fin, just like the dorsal and anal fin of the pikes and the pickerels are placed. So if you ignore the head, you'll see the family resemblance there. You'll see that their bodies are built the same way. And the work that has been done on understanding evolutionary relationships between the mud minnows and the pike show that a good story to think about is ancestrally, maybe 90, 95 million years ago, there was a common ancestor of the Olympic mud minnow and all the pikes that probably looked very much like a mud minnow. So it was a little fish, dorsal and anal fins placed far back on the body. All of these fish share this ambush predator lifestyle, so they don't swim around a lot. They just hang out and hold position, semi-hidden, before they strike some prey item. And from this common ancestral mud minnow type, the pike lineage emerged, and a group of ancestral mud minnows became big predators instead of sticking
Badass.
around. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's good to know because I can guarantee you I only looked at the head.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, that's the cool end, right? I wasn't looking at any anal fins, but maybe I should.
When I was doing my graduate work, I worked with this group of fish, and I had an opportunity to have mud minnows in and see mud minnows in fish tanks and see their behavior, and it is just like seeing a tiny little pike. So
Oh, that's cool.
they're they're very visual and very active predators. So they just like a pike, they will use their pectoral fins and their anal and dorsal fins to they undulate those fins to hold position, right? So they're just kind of like a little helicopter hovering with incredible control over their position in the water column, and they're just scanning for feeding opportunities. So I had mud minnows in fish tanks where you throw in a few brine shrimp in there, and just like a pike, they very slowly start finding their way close to that food item. And just like a pike, before striking, they curl their bodies so that they can do a big strike, a quick launch, and very quickly get that food. In the case of the mud minnow, the food is a tiny little aquatic invert, but behaviorally, it looks like what you expect pike are doing out there as they wait for some unsuspected salmonid to come through. So
Okay.
there's definitely a family resemblance there. And if I were to take a big guess on the evolution of pike, 90 million years ago, there were some crazy little mud minnow groups and lineages that started really leaning on the heavy predator lifestyle and started getting bigger, and their snouts and sizes evolved to become really good at preying on anything in the water instead of being restricted to just little aquatic inverts.
Yeah, those guys, those guys were like, "All right, we got to work up to dinosaurs," and then the
Hmm.
KPG happened and kind of messed them up a little bit. But
Yeah,
they're getting there now. Now they're
yeah.
getting. Now they say people and like, "All right, now we got to grow again so
Give it
we
a
can start
shot.
eating
We'll
these
give it a
guys." Yeah,
shot. Yeah.
I that's very cool. Admittedly, maybe I didn't give mud minnows a fair chance. And you know what? I'm gonna just use this as a crutch and blame it on the name mud minnow. Like pike sounds awesome, and mud minnow, I was like, that name doesn't interest me as much, and it doesn't have a crocodile head. So I ignored them a little too much. But
Yeah.
hearing that, I'll see if I can look up some videos and stuff after because that sounds really cool. And I've always liked the idea. Like if I was to have fish tanks, I would have like bullhead catfish and stuff because I
Mhm.
just love them, right? And stuff like that. And I've always been like, I mean, I have a caiman, so like, can I have a pike? And the answer is pike. I don't think pike make very good aquarium pets, so I'm not gonna get a pike.
Unless you
But
want just a single fish and you're
yeah,
prepared to spend a lot of money feeding it. Yeah.
yeah, and it'd be just like keeping another crocodile. It'd be
Hmm.
awesome. But maybe I'll look into mud minnows. Maybe you can get them as pets or something. That would be cool. I don't know, but that sounds very cool. I'd like to look that up because yeah, like I said, I didn't give pike a. Well, I mean, when I'm looking into pike diversity and their relatives and whatever, I see mud minnows, and then I'm seeing stuff like the Amur pikes. Have you seen those? Oh my
Yeah.
god! Like, have you ever seen those, Brennick?
No, I haven't.
They are so beautiful. They are. I forget where they're from. It might be Spain.
No, it's the Amur River in
Okay,
Siberia.
Well, of
Yeah.
course it is. So
So
they're nice, Brennick. I'll put some pictures. I'll send them to you before I put them to, or feel free to look it up now if you want to see them. But seeing those guys and then us over here have muskie and and the pickerel, right, which are kind of like mini little pike.
small
And then
pike.
my favorite's always been the pike, like
Mhm.
the northern pike. Have always been my favorite, and the we have. I mean, everybody up here calls walleye pickerel, which is a little annoying, but like
I was just gonna
it's,
say that they call walleye pickerel, or they call pike pickerel, or pickerel pike.
yeah,
Hmm. Yeah,
yeah,
common names. They can be
yeah.
confusing.
Oh yeah. There's a person a couple months ago that posted they posted a little northern pike. It wasn't big. It was maybe 12 inches that they had caught, and they were like convinced it was a walleye pike hybrid.
Oh
And
I
wow,
think I saw
I
that
was
actually.
that's
I was
funny.
like,
No,
everybody was like, no, it's not. Like it's a
that's
pike.
not.
And then other people were like, it's a pickerel, and other people were like, it's a muskie, and you just read it and watch the dumpster fire happen, right? Like it's
That's funny.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on too is because as an angler myself, I'm I've listened to every pike podcast that's out there, every single one, guaranteed. Um,
Hmm.
and like I learned no more about pikes. You know what I mean by that? Like I learned no more about their diversity or
Right.
at the end of the day, it's because it's something anglers don't focus on really, right? Like it's very
Right.
rare you get an angler that's focusing on the biodiversity and genetic
Hmm.
variation of the fish they catch. But I thought it would be a useful if you're catching a fish. I think it's maybe not as important as other people might think, but I think it's useful to understand that animal if you're going to catch it as
Right.
well, and that's really not out there. And kind of bouncing off of that with you specifically, I know you've done lots of work. Like I was reading through some of your the papers that you were featured on or co-authored or authored, and I was really surprised at the diversity, which makes sense looking back on it. I'm pretty new to looking through like that type of resource,
Hmm.
so I'm still learning like what to look out for and stuff. But when I was looking into like, okay, I want to have a pike episode. Who am I going to have on? Your name kept coming up, and I was curious as to like what like with you specifically, and you touched on it a little bit before, but do you work a lot with pike today? Is this a past thing? And what was your specific work with pike?
So the origin of my relationship with the Pike group is a historical accident. When I started graduate school to become a fish ichthyologist or a fish systematist or an ichthyologist, I went to the University of Washington in Seattle, and my advisor there was the curator or is well was the curator of the fish collection at that university, and he had many interests. He's the world's most well-known expert on deep sea angler fishes,
Oh,
but
cool.
he was in Washington, and he also had this interest in understanding the Olympic mud minnow. So I mentioned that the Olympic mud minnow is one of these members of the mud minnow type fish,
And we
and
now know they are badass, just
they
like pike.
all exactly, they're very cool. They do weird things, and they're only found in this very small restricted range in Washington. And if you study fish evolution, one of the cool questions in studying freshwater fishes is understanding how their distribution came to be. So, do you want to know exactly how a particular species ended up in rivers X, Y, or Z versus in this other location? So that area of biogeography or explaining the geography of biodiversity had an interesting question in Washington, which was trying to figure out why the Olympic mud minnow is only found today in this very narrow geographic range. So my advisor said, "Hey, there's this cool question here worth exploring," and there were still some unresolved questions about. The first thing you have to do if you want to answer a question like that is to create that family tree, that set of relationships between the different members of your group. So if you're interested in knowing how the Olympic mud minnow ended up where it ended up, you first need to know who are its closest relatives so that you can learn where its closest relatives are found, and then try to reconstruct the history of movements and connections. So the first question was, we need to figure out the family tree of the mud minnows. And one important tool when you're making these family trees is to have what we call an outgroup, or something you're going to compare your fish to each other in reference to this outgroup. At the time, the classification of these fishes had the mud minnows, all of the mud minnows, the blackfish, the regular mud minnow, the eastern mud minnow, the Olympic mud minnow in one pile, and then all of the pikes, all of the members of Esox in another pile next to each other. So to make this study of understanding the relationships of the mud minnows, we needed to include, or we thought we just needed to include one pike or a couple of pike as the outgroups. But when we actually did the analysis, collected the data, and looked at the results, what we found is that you can't do that because the pike are not an outgroup, they're inside the mud minnow group. And the true outgroup of the mud minnow plus pike group is in the salmonids, the salmons, the whitefishes, and the graylings. So going back to your question, I became interested in pike because I was at the University of Washington looking for a cool project to lead as a graduate um, project or a graduate thesis, and my advisor pointed me in this direction of a cool question to answer, and it turned out that the answer was even cooler than we thought when we set out to ask it. And from then on, I kind of started building an early research portfolio centered on pike evolution, not necessarily pike evolution, on the evolution of the Isociformes, which is the group that includes the pikes, the mud minnows, and their relatives.
Gotcha. It's actually interesting that you say that. You just told me a very similar story to our last guest, which Brennick missed. Little bastard. Um, it where he was kind of doing the same thing, kind of wanted to study herpetological. And our last guest was Zach Loafman, and he's like one of the very few people in the world now studying crayfish. Like that's the route he went.
Uh-huh.
And so we spent like 40 minutes talking about crayfish, and it was awesome. Like it was a really cool conversation, and I learned a lot about crayfish, which are other little overstimulated predators, right? Like they're like little boxers. They're super cool. But and another thing that I don't know about down there, pike up here love crayfish. They eat those little guys too. We saw. My parents live on the lake, which is where I used to live. It's about 5 minutes from me now. It's not too bad of a lake. It's a nice lake, and it's connected to the Kapuskasing River, so we're always getting new fish in and whatnot. And there was this one pike that I lived in this bunkie house on the property, and it was like it must have been 20 feet by 15 feet. Like it was like the tiniest thing ever. It was awesome. I loved living in that thing. And out of my two windows, I had the lake and the lake. Like everywhere around me where I'd look outside was water. So in the middle of the night, if I was bored or having a hard time sleeping or whatever, I'd go out there with a big flashlight and I'd see what was off the edge of the dock. And there was this one pike. It wasn't huge. It was maybe 24 inches at most. And it was always there in the shallows. Every night it would come into the shallows. And then it would go back out by the time it was morning. The next day in the shallows, here it is again in the shallows. And it was,
cool.
I always saw it still. It was all sand. There was nothing, no plants or nothing. And it wasn't even under the dock. It was actually about 5 feet away from the dock, just out in the open. And I always thought it was really interesting and weird. And then one day we had seen it eat a crayfish, like right there. It had gone after a crayfish, and then it was kind of like, oh, okay, is that what you're doing over here? Like, are you the
Mhm.
one that's maybe not big enough to play with the other pike, so you're hanging out here in the shallows eating
Yep.
crayfish until you get
Yeah.
there? And
Mhm.
I would have assumed that maybe they probably would not specify, but prefer freshly molted crayfish. This thing was eating whatever the hell it could get. Like
Mhm. Right.
it didn't
Yeah.
care. It was just like, no, if you're crayfish in front of me, I'm gonna eat you. I don't care if you're
Yeah. I
barred
don't
or
think they care.
yeah. But that's very cool. So are you not to separate them, but just for the fun of the show, if you were to separate like Team Mud Minnow and Team Pike, are you more Team Pike or Team Mud Minnow? Even though it's not even a real question at all.
Yeah, no, I like the whole group. They're all very interesting. Here in Alaska, we have the one representative of the mud minnow assemblage is the Alaska blackfish, and those fish are very interesting. They're air breathers, or they have the ability to breathe air. They have a modified the roof of their esophagus is highly capillarized, so they can gulp a bubble of air from the surface, put it there, put it in the back of their mouths towards their throat, and then get oxygen by exchanging gases with that air bubble. So it is the only Arctic freshwater fish that can air breathe.
Oh, that's cool.
And yeah, so it's a neat little trait in in that same assemblage of mud minnows. You have the eastern and the central mud minnow, and Europe has the European mud minnow. They can breathe air, but they get their oxygen from gas exchange in their air bladders, in their swim bladders. So they have specialized glands that allow them to, well, first they gulp air and put it in the swim bladder, and then from the swim bladder surface, they can draw oxygen and release CO2. So the
Oh,
group is very neat. They do all sorts of weird things. I Going back to your question, I don't have favorites, and
yeah, of
in fact, I
course.
mean, in fish diversity, I don't really have favorites because every lineage does something super interesting, or their evolutionary history is bizarre. So everywhere you look in the fish world, there are neat stories about how evolution has shaped this basic body plan and made it do something especially well or especially different.
Yeah, and I know that's the case too with like there's some populations of northern pike in Scandinavia where they seem to be, and correct me if I say anything wrong, but they seem to be a little genetically distinct, and a lot of them are getting like record sizes because
Mm,
I don't know what the reason is. Just their genetic
okay.
population being cut off, maybe untouched by humans. I'm sure
Mhm.
is usually my backup guess because it tends to be right. But
Yeah.
like I always thought that was really cool too. Where like if you see them in a documentary or something, they look like northern pike on steroids or something. Like
Huh.
and
I hadn't heard about that. I thought where you were going with that question. I know that in the Baltic Sea, in that part of the world, there are populations of northern pike that are really well suited to living in brackish water.
I was gonna
So
bring that up next, actually. Yeah.
yeah, so there's that, which is rare, because if you look across the entire range of northern pike, there are mostly almost entirely restricted to pure fresh water, and some of these Baltic Sea populations spawn in brackish water and spend a lot of time out there in those conditions. So they're they're definitely different that way. I have not heard about lineages of Scandinavian populations of pike that are very different. I do know that in Europe there's there's several species of Esox that are recognized on top of the northern pike. So there's like, I want to say like two or three other species of Esox that have been described in the past 10 to 15 years that kind of separate certain areas of pike distributions in Europe from others.
Yeah. That's something that really interests me because, like, and I said last obviously last episode, Brennick, we talked about it a bunch. The episode before that, I said I was going to bring it up. I'm a garter snake guy. And like, so that's something I'm really interested, because garter snakes are always going back and forth. And like the garter snake, which are also pike love to eat garter snakes. So, but the populations of not garter snakes, but natricines that are in Europe, like it almost reminds me of pike in a couple weird ways. And I think that's maybe why I'm so interested. One of the reasons why I'm interested in pike is they remind me of my favorites, and because they're just super awesome. But yeah, the population. I wish I remembered more details. It was something that I read about maybe 5 or 6 years ago now, and I have the memory. Oh, I was going to say of a goldfish, but I wouldn't want to offend you, Andreas. What animal do you hate? No, I'm joking. I know. I'm joking. But yeah, so like, but it was basically saying that like there's so many little lakes in, I want to say, Sweden or Finland that are just untouched. Like people do not fish them. People rarely go to them. And in these lakes that have been, a lot of the lakes in North America are new, whereas a lot of the ones over there, and I'm sure a lot of ours are old too, a lot of the ones over in over there are super, super old, and these fish have been separated for millions and millions of years. And like from what I can tell from footage of them and people that have caught them, they don't seem to look any different, aside from the fact that they just look like almost like a muskie. Like they're just very, very heavy bodied. And you could see northern pike like that too. Although sometimes northern pike get like fat, like they get like the oval shaped really body, and you're like, oh my god, what the heck? Where's the muskie nice and streamlined?
Yeah.
But I always thought that was
I
cool.
think one of the saddest things to see is it's nice when aquariums have native fishes and they have like beautiful displays that have pike and sturgeon and things like that. But sometimes just to keep them happy, they need to be fed a lot, and you see this really, really heavy bodied pike and animals
like
that yeah, you know that in nature they would never look like that. So
oh no, they're super lean, right? And,
yeah.
Oh man, I'm going to and this is such a me thing. I've been to the Ripley's Aquarium in Toronto. It's the only big aquarium I've been to, and they have some northern pike. It's my favorite fish they have there. Right? That's the kind of person I am. If a zoo has garter snakes, that's my favorite. If the aquarium has pike, that's my favorite to look at. And I'm going to in about 4 or 5 days. I'll be at the BC Aquarium, and I'm traveling to the other end of the country, and I hope they have pike. I can just sit there and watch pike,
Nice.
and I hope they're not fat carp looking.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll have muskie too. That would be cool. I'd like to see some muskie. But I think that's the biggest aquarium in Canada, so I'd be a little surprised if they didn't have pike. I'll write them a pretty nasty review if they don't.
Yeah.
I'm joking. But do you? Oh man, I had a question for you, and I'm sure it sucked, but now I think I'm forgetting it. Brennick, do you have anything while I try to remember my question I had?
I'm in the same boat. I was literally just thinking of it, and it's.
I remember it now. You mentioned what pike will do when they strike is they'll bend their body and they like spring out. Now, I've heard that when they do that, they are considered the fastest freshwater fish in the world. Do you know anything about that? Have you ever heard that before?
Never heard that before.
I wish I got some numbers ready for that, because I could kind of forgotten about it. But when you said that, it reminded me of that. And supposedly, and I'll look into it. Maybe I'll find a paper or something. But yeah, I read somewhere that when pike do that, they're considered the fastest freshwater fish in the world, northern pike specifically. And
that's cool.
Which I thought was really cool too. And I've read it from more than one source, so maybe that lends it a little more credibility. But I mean, it makes sense. Like you I know you said you
just as a little side note, when you said that you've read it from more than one source, one thing to be very, very careful with, especially with really old facts that have been generated, hopefully by research, is there is a tendency sometimes to a poorly established fact becoming a known thing because people keep repeating it, and just
like at
some point they even forget pointing to the original report. So it's always useful to first job is to go to that original report to make sure that what is being quoted is said in that report. Second, you want to see if you're convinced that the report actually showed that. So if you want to see
Mhm.
that the measurements that were taken were made sense and were analyzed properly and they were sufficient. So if somebody reported this based on just looking at one fish doing something weird, and then from then on everybody quotes that paper, we are making the mistake of just repeating something that has no basis on solid evidence. So just independent of this particular fact,
Of
you
course.
see it a lot, especially when it comes to the biology of fish that maybe don't get a lot of attention because they're not commercially important, or they're not focus of a lot of research. We as a community of people tend to rely heavily on those early sources, hoping that that was done properly, and just keep repeating it and repeating it and repeating it. So it's always a good idea to go all the way to that first report and feel confident that it was done correctly and that the little fact that comes out of it is actually supported by true evidence instead of an anecdote or repeating something that was being said at that time. I
Yeah.
see it quite a bit.
Oh, I'm sure you do. I'll look into that again too, and I'll post something in the episode where I'm like, don't listen to a word I fucking say, or maybe it is true. I don't know,
Yeah.
but I mean, I like to think it is. But could you imagine if everybody went and looked into the answers that they read? If everybody in the world did that for one thing, could you imagine how far along we would be right now?
I know, yeah.
Yeah, right. It ain't happening. But yeah, I'll look into that for sure. Um, if I look it up and it turns out they're like, yeah, they're actually slower than minnows, I'm gonna be so
No,
pissed off.
they're definitely fast, and the other cool thing is that I know that there's research on that. I mean, there folks are very interested in the functional anatomy of that strike response. So I
Yeah,
know, and I don't recall the specific papers or the findings, but I do know that people have tried to understand how pike are so good at striking fast, and
yeah, and
they've
I
been
also know
subjects of the studies.
from like an angler perspective, like there's very few times you can outrun a pike like with a lure. They're gonna be
Hmm.
faster than you. And there's that awesome video. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's turned into a meme a couple years ago where there's a camera attached to a
Allure.
fishing lure,
Uh-huh.
and then the
Yeah.
pike comes, and just that video is so funny. I'll see if I can put it in the show because I mean, I feel like that one, like you said, they're usually ambush predators, but they're obviously diverse animals, just like anything else. Like people say the same thing about reptiles all the time. Ball pythons live underground. Ball pythons live in the trees. They do whatever the hell they want, and
Hmm.
it's an animal. It's got free will to do what it chooses and whatever benefits it in the moment. That pike was just totally like, I'm going to pursue this thing, and from what I understand, it caught up and actually bit the camera and not the lure.
Oh,
it was
oh
it was
no,
chasing the camera instead,
that's
which I
funny.
thought was pretty funny. But I love that video. That video is so funny. Little guy. Uh, that paints him in almost like a cute image because he's trying so hard, and he doesn't look like a very. When pike get big, they get mean and gnarly looking. They're like covered in
Hmm.
old
Scars from all their
scars and
fights.
stuff, and I know they're pretty aggressive breeders, like spawners, so they're always like gnarled up, especially the big females. And he was just a cute little guy. Hammer
Can we touch
handles.
on
That's
that?
what we call him. On what? On
How they're aggressive spawners? Because I have no
oh,
idea how that works. So please inform me.
Andres. Andres, do you know much about their
A little bit, just general information. So the timing is always right in the right after ice out, where there's ice, so they're early spring, and then the habitat is shallows with emergent vegetation. The females start looking for those locations. Males come around and start hanging out by them. They do a lot of kind of displays for each other, kind of holding position next to each other, and at least in some of these species, I think there's this agonistic displays where the dorsal and anal fins are splayed out just to kind of show yourself. And then in terms of aggressiveness, I think there may be not territoriality, so they're not making nests, but there may be intersex competition for being in the best position close to a female. But there's no kind of, unlike salmon, where there tends to be some kind of, at least an attempt at one-to-one pairing. In reality, once the spawning begins, it's a free-for-all. I
Yep.
think in pike it's more like one female and there will be multiple males hanging out, trying to kind of be in the best placement, but not necessarily monopolizing that female. And then release of gametes into emergent vegetation. The eggs are sticky, so they stick to substrates and they develop there. So from what I know, I don't know if there's like extensive fighting between individuals, but there's definitely a lot of action because all these animals are congregating in preferred habitats and finding the right locations to pair up for when the time is the right time.
Kind of sounds like garter snakes, eh, Brennick?
A little bit.
It's now like a trope of the show is I'm never going to be able to. Our mosasaur guy, I went the whole episode without bringing up garter snakes, and then he brought up garter snakes out of nowhere, and so
That's
I
so funny.
freaked out at him, kicked him out of the show, and he's not allowed back on, of course. But so now I'm just like, I told him, I said, this is your fault, and I'm now going to find a way to bring them up every single episode. Can you I know want to talk now. Do you know much about and this is more, I don't know if it's even worth bringing up. Do you want to talk at all about tiger muskies? They're not a species, they're a hybrid.
Oh, hybrids.
Yeah, I don't know if you know. I assume you don't study them much, just being in Alaska and whatnot. But
the only thing that I would bring up that is really neat is that hybridization in the genus Esox is common. There's a lot of weird hybrids between the pickerels, between muskies and northern pike. So it happens a lot, and it's been studied where people have experimentally tried to make crosses between all the different members. And the reason it's interesting to me is the evolutionary perspective. If we look at the family tree of the different species of Esox, the pickerels split from all the other members of the family, which include the muskies and the northern and Amur pike, way back in the past, let's say 60 million years ago, or really many tens of millions of years ago. Yet it is possible to make offspring from crossing across that huge evolutionary distance, which is unexpected. You on first principles, you think that as the time since divergence gets longer and longer, it becomes harder and harder to make viable offspring by crossing from one branch of the tree to another. But in the pike, you can go really far back and still have viable offspring that may not be fertile, but at least you can create an embryo that develops into a little fish, which is it's interesting. And tigers are a good example of that because the muskie line split from the northern pike line a long time ago. So it's not like crossing two species of trout, which may be only 2 million years different from each other, which is not that hard, or it doesn't seem that crazy for it to be possible. But muskies and northern pike are pretty different from each other in evolutionary linear or time.
Mm-hmm.
And you can have tiger muskies, and it happens. It happens in nature.
Yeah, it does happen in nature. And one thing that I was reading about that was cool, as the lakes. So there's lakes that have unnatural tiger muskies because northern pike are getting into a lot of lakes in southern Ontario where there usually haven't been, where muskies have been the predominant predatory fish. And in places where they're both native, which is apparently usually, from what I understand, it's usually one or the other, depending on the size of the lake. But the ones that naturally have them both, I want to say the pike, and I'm gonna have to check this out, and I'll clarify for the episode. The pike will spawn twice in the year.
Oh, cool. Hmm.
And it's believed that, or maybe the muskie spawn twice. And I
Hmm.
think it's the muskie. The muskie spawn twice in the year because the pike, they grow. I don't know. I got to look into it. Like I'm
Okay.
just giving shit. So I'll look into it and I'll post it. But yeah, there one of them grows. One of them in those lakes, only the ones that they're native, where it's not a natural thing, where they'll spawn twice a year. One of them, and it's because the other one grows faster or is more or spawns earlier. That's it. It's because northern pike spawn earlier. I'm getting there slowly, but yeah, it's something that really interests me too because tiger muskie are from what I understand of them too, they grow a little faster than the musky muskellunge do, which is pretty cool. And I mean, look at them; they're badass fish. And what you
Hmm.
were saying really interested me too about how they are they diverged that far that long ago and can still interbreed. It almost makes me wonder if when they came across this Esox body plan, if they just kind of slowed right down in terms of diversification because maybe they didn't have to fast enough or faster
Yeah.
and then when they started diversifying so they were able to remain more genetically similar. Do you have any theories on that or any ideas?
No good ideas, and it's always fraught with danger when you try to make
Yeah.
big general conclusions based on a single lineage.
Hmm.
So the lineage that includes the pikes and the mud minnows is the sister group or the closest living relative to the lineage that includes all the salmonids. So in the salmonid line, you have a couple of hundred species. And then in the other line, total, including all the pikes and all the mud minnows, you have maybe 10, 12 species. So their fates are very different. But they all started in the same point in the same location, somewhere in a northern landmass. And
Hmm.
they've kind of occupied the same both geographical area and the same climate and the same opportunities, yet you have two very different outcomes. So trying to learn lessons from that is it's really tricky because unlike a true experimenter where you would be able to make a whole bunch of treatments and see outcomes based on how you controlled conditions, natural experiments are full of noise and uncontrolled conditions, and they generate this crazy amount of different outcomes that
Yeah.
become very hard to interpret. So going back to the pike, among the Isociformes, so the group that includes Esox and all the mud minnows, the Esox is the most diverse. So there are more different species of Esox than there are mud minnows plus blackfish plus Olympic mud minnow combined. Even though for example, the mud minnow lineage goes farther back than the beginning of the Esox lineage, and they haven't reached a lot of species diversity. So I'm always hesitant to make big conclusions about evolutionary mechanisms and principles at play in what we see today. I'm if you're to classify evolutionary biologists into folks that feel that there are big laws of evolution to be discovered, and the school that feels that evolution is more of a historical accident full of weirdness that doesn't follow some general principles, I lean more towards the latter. I
Gotcha.
think that accident plays a much bigger role on shaping living diversity than big loss of evolution.
Yeah. Of course. Of course.
I mean,
Very.
obviously, you can get, within reason, right? So there's energy and physics, and there are limits to limits that physics plays on biology to find solutions or the solutions that are possible. So I'm not oblivious to those big constraints, but inside of that, once you get to a fish, what happens to different fish body plans, I think is mostly driven by accident and by these big general principles that are hard limits or hard shapers of diversity.
Yeah. Okay. So completely ignoring what you just said, are muskie going to get big enough to eat people?
I am, I am,
Hey, could you
it,
imagine? it would be cool to like, now that we're coming into kind of the tail end of the episode here, just to go a little off the rails. I think it would be cool, like, if you could, like, okay, let's take a peek 25 million years into the future, if we haven't blown everything up and killed everything, what, and this totally goes for other evolutionary lines too. Like, what are, if they're even around still, like, what are Esox doing? What are their descendants doing? You know what I mean? Like, it'd be cool to know, because I mean, how many fish, like, Cretaceous isn't that long ago, like a geological timeline. So like,
Mm-hmm.
no, there's lots of time for Esox to do something weird, or their descendants to do something weird, right? I mean, their
Yeah.
ancestors did it, so, and who's to say that they're not gonna, like those Baltic pike, those things, in 60 million years, 60 feet, eating whales,
Yeah.
which
So
obviously is a joke, but
like one possible idea to play with, to riff on, is this idea that if the salmonids are the sister lineage to the pikes, we know that the salmonids figure out generally many times in their evolution how to be marine fish. So there are no salmonids that are full marine fish, but many salmonids either can venture into saltwater, or like the Alaskan salmon, they actually have a life history that involves a full marine phase. So we, and like you mentioned, there's this Baltic Sea population of pike that are already dipping their toe into salty water. So we could imagine a world where over time this lineage cracks the code of how to be a full marine group. And
mhm.
maybe that opens all these opportunities for pike to become more diverse, to take on different life histories that involve exploiting marine environments, things that are not possible to any species of pike today. So that could be one way of thinking about it, right? Not about
Yeah,
size necessarily, but diversifying into new ecological opportunities that today pike do not exploit at all.
yeah. Which I'm just gonna naturally fall back onto Mosasaurus Part 2. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's just
Yeah.
where
Just
I'm
gonna
gonna.
say Mosasaur 2.0.
Yeah, just because it's badass. That's the only reason. There's no science behind it aside from just that
It
would
is
be cool.
cool.
It would be awesome.
Yeah.
I like that's pike that convergently evolved with as whales, right? Like with whales, that
Mm.
just like the lizards did not long ago with the Mosasaurus. That'd be cool. Yeah, yeah. I think pike are catfish were my favorite for a long time. As soon as I moved up here, it turned into pike, and ever since then, I've had all these questions about a lot of the stuff we talked about today with pike and their roles, and where they came from is really interesting to me. And I think that, like you said, even just minus, like, not even just including riffing for the show in general, but imagining, and you could say this with any species, but like imagining where they're going to end up is really interesting, because I think for a species or a genus like that, it's very well, for any, it's hard to tell, but it's really interesting to think about them because they're so unique, and maybe not unique among fish in general, but like I feel like they are with regards to freshwater fish, pretty unique, and it's just cool to imagine where they're gonna. Obviously, there's no end goal, but like where they're gonna go to next, especially
Mm-hmm.
with human. I mean, we're gonna send them to Asia at some point, so
Mm-hmm.
like
It's
there's
a
gonna
matter of
be
time.
the worldwide pike takeover, but
So,
I guess
I mean, northern pike are found throughout northern Asia. So,
are they over
so
there
they're
already? I
yeah,
didn't even know
hmm
that.
yeah. No, that's part of their native range.
Oh, that's
So
native. Wow. Okay.
they have what's called a whole Arctic distribution. So all of the northern land masses have native populations of
Okay.
northern pike. So North America, Asia, and Europe, that is ancestral range for northern pike. And there's some evidence suggesting that during the most recent glacial cycling, because there was a big sheet of ice interrupting that range, the living populations of pike survived either on the western side of that ice sheet or on the eastern side, and now they're coming back together, or they have come back together since the ice sheets retreated and meet again. And very likely the meeting place of these two surviving lineages is here in Alaska. So there is some evidence from sex determination systems that Alaska, Western Alaska, is mostly the northern pike in Western Alaska are mostly descendants of things that survived on the western side of the ice sheet, and then northern populations in eastern Alaska, up to about where I live, come from descendants of the eastern side of that thing. And now they're meeting here and doing things together, and the evidence is in the genetics.
That's very cool. And am I crazy for thinking that that range for a freshwater fish is pretty substantial? Like for a native range,
Yeah.
like that sounds like it's huge.
Yeah, it is they have a really broad distribution. There are some sturgeon, some sturgeon have really broad holarctic ranges. There are
I guess
some
perch
salmoniid
come to mind.
species.
There's lots of perch
Yeah.
over in.
So there are a few
Over there.
lineages that definitely spread throughout the holarctic. The key requirement would be that they're strong swimmers to get across different
Yeah.
distances. Guys, I apologize, but
Oh, you're
I'm
good?
gonna have to cut it short because
good, man.
we had a big snowstorm today, and my wife is already outside shoveling the driveway, and I feel bad that I'm not out there helping her.
Well,
Hey,
on
no
behalf
worries.
of us, thank her for us. Is there anything you want to plug? I don't at all. Or you're
No,
all good?
not at all. No.
Perfect.
Good
Okay,
luck with your
fantastic.
podcast, and
No worries.
if
Thank you
you're
for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
okay. If
You have a good day.
when you post this, your viewers have follow-up questions, feel free to send them my way.
Of course, and I'll send you the link as well. Thank you
Okay.
very much for joining us, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you,
It
Andres.
was
Have a good
fun
one.
talking to you guys. Bye.
Yeah, see you. And just like that, he's gone. Thank you for tuning in to Creature Crossing. Please check the description for social media links, Patreon, and more. Feel free to subscribe and leave us a review. The song used for our intro and our outro is called The Snake Eater's Palace, Outer Heaven by Audio Mocha, Anime Vivi, and Endless Repeat, which we found at ocremix.org. Thanks again for listening.